All right, thanks everybody for joining us today. You're joining us for SalesIntel and Joy.ai, and we're going to talk about how to customize your messaging for the 7 unique buyer types. You have with you today myself, SalesIntel. SalesIntel has the highest quality database of B2B buyer data, which is important for you to be able to execute on strategies like we'll be talking about today. And then we have Bruce with us for Joy.ai. He's CEO and founder. Bruce, welcome.
Thanks. Good to be with you, Jason.
Great. Bruce, you
yeah, and I don't know if everybody else might want to, if somebody else could chime in on chat, but Jason, you're breaking up a lot.
Okay.
So is that just with me or are other people hearing Jason breaking up?
Let me try something, and
while you try that, I'll just I can give a quick overview if you'd like.
Yeah.
So just my background, I'm an old guy. I started selling in the 1980s, back in the time where cold calling literally meant walking door to door in big buildings and trying to get in past gatekeepers, which was easy then because you just walked in the back door, trying to get through to decision makers. It truly was out in the cold calling and where it comes from. But as a result of that, you developed an incredible set of skills and an incredible just agility to adapt on the fly. And of all the things that we were taught then and what I've used, the most important skill by far is being able to recognize, identify the personality of the person you're talking with, and then adapt to that personality. So what we did is we took all the science behind that and then decades of experience training salespeople, top performing salespeople to do it, and put it into a system called Joy.ai that helps people figure out who the personality on the fly. So that's me. So Jason, how's the microphone going?
Yeah, tell me, does that sound better?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Awesome. Yeah, that's what I get for trying to use my AirPods to get higher quality audio. All right, cool. I'm glad that's working better. All right, so we're going to do a quick poll here. Let me pull this up. So yeah, interested in hearing what kind of representation, what roles do we have with us today? So if you can chime in on that quickly here, we'll give it just a couple of minutes.
Yeah, and Jason, as you go through that, we separated the two types of salesperson that is full cycle and the business development rep who is selling and just really focused on setting appointments and then handing those off to somebody.
Great. All right, we'll give it just another second, see if anybody else
wants.
Yeah,
please everybody participate. Appreciate it.
All right, looks like we have a mix of executive, sales, and marketing, which speaks pretty well to the type of spread that we'll be talking about here whenever you're doing your pitching.
Perfect.
All right, we can go back into that. So thanks everybody for posting to the poll. So why is it so important to understand who you're pitching to, selling to, and tailoring your message? And the big part of that is avoiding that last minute veto. So how many of you out there have had a deal where you thought it was on the finish line, you had a decision that was due that day, and then out of nowhere you hear of somebody else within the organization who's vetoing the whole deal you've been working on for days, weeks, in some cases months. And increasingly, I know for me and the teams I've worked with, that's happening more and more often, it seems. Bruce, I'm sure probably similar on your end.
Yeah, absolutely. It's if you aren't prepared for that, if you don't see that person in advance, it's too late by the time you're done before you even know it.
Yeah.
It's like the most difficult negotiations are when you don't know you're in.
Yeah, and so that's where it's crucial to understand that, one, the days of a single decision maker are largely gone. And if you don't know who all your decision makers are and who you need to be engaging with to get to a yes, then you're really vulnerable to this last minute, no or veto from further up the chain. So it's really crucial to one, understand who those buyers are, and then two, engage with those early on in the process.
And
So,
Jason, if I
yeah.
just add one thing for the marketing people that are on, it's essential that marketing identify a larger group to market to, even though you might not call on those people. You need to influence those people in advance of the salesperson getting into the organization. So, and we'll talk more about that later on, but marketing has a big role to play in this as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I talk to my team about this often, that, you know, just because they're not necessarily a decision maker or don't necessarily hold the purse strings on a decision or on a buying decision, doesn't mean that these people aren't crucial. So oftentimes the end user, or the person that's going to benefit most from your product or service, is not necessarily the person making the buying decision. And so you have to have buy-in and understanding from those people who are going to be your end users at the end of the day, because they're the ones that are going to help advance the deal and help, you know, for higher ups understand the need, as well as they'll oftentimes be your cheerleader in the process and your foot in the door. Because the higher up the chain you go, the harder it is to get in front of them. So oftentimes the only way to effectively do that is somebody further down the ladder from that ultimate decision maker. All right, so what is a decision committee and why is it important? So decision committees are a group of decision makers required to sign off on a purchasing decision. Oftentimes these are across multiple departments. In particular, as our platforms, as our products and services have gotten more complex and holistic, then it's become increasingly important to engage those decision makers across those different functions and departments. The number of decision makers involved in a business-to-business buying decision is steadily growing. So go back 5 years ago, that was a little over 5 decision makers in a deal on average. That had risen to just shy of 7 in 2016. Currently, most studies show somewhere between 7 and 10 decision makers are involved in your average B2B buying decision these days. And then crucial to those, the number of decision makers increase, so does the average sales time. So, you know, the amount of time it takes to close a deal, as well as your, it tends to be proportional to the number of decision makers. And then your close ratio oftentimes becomes inversely proportional. So the more decision makers you have on a deal, the lower your close rate is oftentimes going to be. Those trends should alarm most people, because it's going to, you know, really the only way, the only options to scale or deal with that are, one, just, you know, pile more people into the top of the funnel, knowing that it's going to take longer and you're going to close fewer, or you've got to get better at your selling and marketing process. And the key to that is knowing who you're pitching to and how to speak to those different personas within the organization. So crucial to that, you have to know who your decision makers are. You need to know what their titles are, what departments they're in, what responsibilities do they have, and in particular, and this one's huge, what are those pain points particular to that person or persona within the organization? So somebody in marketing is going to have a very different pain point that you're going to speak to than somebody in sales, or somebody in operations, or somebody in finance. So you're going to need to tailor your pitch and what you're talking about and how you talk about that based off of those personas and what they're interested in and what pain points you're trying to solve for those individuals. And so this is crucial to being able to move deals along faster, as well as close more of them in this day of cross-department buying committees. And then crucial to that is, you know, you're only as good as the data that you have. So even if you've really clearly defined who your decision makers are and what your ideal customer looks like from an account perspective, then the other piece of that is you have to be able to know who to target and how to target those people. So a great case in point would be if your primary lead gen initiative are events. The chances that all of the decision makers you're going to wind up having to talk to close the deal came by your booth at that event are slim to none. And so you're left with 2 options in following up and trying to advance and close that deal. One is just to ask for a referral, or for that person to bring in the other decision makers. The other is to be able to go and source the data and the information on those other decision makers that you need to get in touch with, to be able to start getting them the information, the collateral that you have specific around that. That's also really important in case the person that you spoke with goes dark or forgets why they spoke to you or who you were. So yeah, this works across all of your different lead gen activities. The chance that you've got all of the information for all the people you need to be speaking to is virtually nil. So having a resource for being able to go and append and add additional data sources, different additional points of contact of that company, as well as being able to target the right people out the gate whenever you're trying to warm and nurture them is really essential. All right, so Bruce, we'll hand it over to you here. Let you talk about what the different players are and how you actually get them to pay attention and help to advance a deal.
Yeah, Jason, thanks for that. It was a wonderful overview of that. And good data is essential. You just can't go forward without it. And it's not just name and phone number anymore, as Jason said. You really need to know about the company and industry, the things we call firmographics. For the marketing people on the line, I want to let you know in advance that in addition to talking about personality, I'll try to tie this back to your world. In particular, thinking about things on the classic crossing the chasm curve and where how marketing fits in each component of that based on personality. But first, let's look at something that's essential called the rapport effect. If we can move to the next slide. What, in fact, if you read researchers like Cialdini, you look at the last two Nobel Prizes that were won in behavioral economics, all of them in their research leverage something called the rapport effect. And it is essentially this, that when we feel a sense of rapport with people, we cannot help ourselves. Whatever they tell us, we give more weight to, more credence to, than we do with somebody where you don't have rapport. And we all know that people make decisions, not corporations. And people make decisions primarily based on emotional drivers all the way through the process. Now they're going to do an ROI calculation for sure, but they're along the sales process, they are going to eliminate options left and right that don't appeal to them emotionally. So emotions are incredibly important, and the most important is if somebody feels a sense of rapport with you. So, you know, if you're weighing your set of benefits versus your competitor's set of benefits on a scale, and both of you had, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, had 5 points worth of benefits, maybe difference, but if you're purely logical, you'd both get a 5. If you had a sense of rapport with the customer, that customer cannot help it. Their brain elevates the importance of what you're doing to a 7, and if somebody else does not have a sense of rapport, it would lower theirs to a 2 or 3. So that's just the way it is. So with that understanding, let's look and see how that actually plays out in real life, the rapport effect. So this is a study that we did with IBM. What they looked at, we were able to measure in a cold call something called positive engagement. Does the customer emotionally engage? Most customers, when you call them, let's face it, you're interrupting their day. The call is unexpected. Most of their cold call experiences are bad, so they're used to it for another bad experience. So they start out in pretty much a negative plane. Do they become positive from that? And we can measure it. It is the most effective way to measure the effectiveness of cold calls, because ultimately the salesperson cannot control the outcome if you just do it purely on, did this person set an appointment? They may have just bought something similar and just have no ability to buy. That doesn't mean that the rep didn't do a good job and can call back again. So positive engagement versus negative engagement. Let's look at the results when you take personality, or sometimes we'll call personality interchangeable with temperament, when you take that into account. So if we could go to the next slide. So in the control group here, they had callers, these are experienced cold callers, and they measured the rapport effect and positive engagement. So in the control group, 37% of the time, they were able to get to positive engagement. Pretty good. It's probably significantly more than the average. And then all we did is we took people and we profiled the sales team. And by the way, I'm going to give you access at Joy.ai.org to take a personality assessment yourselves, because as a salesperson, it's essential to know who you are. In fact, everybody should know this. So you can take it for free there. So what we did is we had the sales team take them, and then we went through a list of 20,000 prospects, and we personality profiled all of those prospects using our AI tool. And then as you'll look and we talk about different personality types, we simply match people up with people, prospects up with salespeople who had the same dominant personality characteristic. And what happened with that, we didn't change scripts, we didn't train the salespeople in anything, just the fact that they were the same. They clicked with one another. We tend to trust people who are like us, talk the way we do, have the same values we do. It turns out that people who are like us tend to have the same tonality, talk with the same level of detail, lots of same level of enthusiasm, lots of different things that the subconscious brain of the prospect picks up. So when we did that, we simply match positive engagement from 37 to 54%. Then what we did is we did the whole thing. We had marketing, because we'd identified people by their personality type, send personality-driven messages. For example, people that are very risk averse, it was all about how using IBM reduced risk. People that were real innovators, don't care much about risk, it was about the innovative technology. As two of many examples. When we did that, when we prep people and we had the reps use, scripts it gets you to think that it's word for word, but they had script guides that were based on the personality of the prospect. Positive engagement went to 78%, and the reps set more appointments each day than they normally do in a week. That is the impact that personality has on the rapport effect. All right, let's go to the next slide and look at personalities. So basically, there are 7 personality types. If you do the research on personality and what's really dominant in the marketplace, you'll find this thing called the Big 5. It is the most researched, most proven methodology of classifying the dominant personality characteristics. We use those 5, and there are 2 other characteristics that are not as common as dominance in the general public, but tend to be more common in business. So they did not include those 2 in the Big 5 because they looked at the 5 biggest. We add them here because they come up in business. Now, most of you probably on this line have taken a DISC assessment. I want you to very quickly write down a piece of paper. You don't have to share it. What year you think DISC was invented, the theory behind DISC. And okay, you've got it there. So here's the answer. You can use this at the next party you go to. The answer is 1928. And the person that invented it was a pop psychologist who's really famous for something other than DISC, believe it or not. He was doing cartoons and he developed the character Wonder Woman. So most of what we've used up to now in the sales industry has been from 1928. This brings it to modern research. And what we've done is we've given names to these dominant characteristics that are stereotypical of what we would think when we think of these types of jobs, and therefore it helps salespeople remember them. So we're going to dive into them. Let's go to the first one. The go-getter you're going to call on if you call on financial services people, stockbrokers, entrepreneurs, sometimes individual small business people that are driving their own business. These people, when you encounter them, you know them right away. They are highly motivated by financial gain. They want to show that they're financially successful. They can be very, very charming when they want to be, to get you to do what they want, and then turn around and tell somebody else exactly the opposite thing, be very charming to them as well, and not see the incongruence at all. And on LinkedIn, you can see these people. They stand out because they advance quickly in jobs, but they don't do it by staying in the same organization. They advance by moving from organization. There'll be maybe a line level manager at one company for 8 months or a year, and then they switch to be a full manager at another company. Then they switch to a year later to be a VP at another company, and then a senior VP at another company, rarely with organizations more than a year or 2. And they're always moving up when they're doing it. So with these people, it's all about the deal. And when you're selling to them, you want to be aggressive. You want to be, just think of a street hustler kind of thing. You want to be in that kind of modality. And you better not ever show any weakness because they'll pounce on it. And finally with them, because we're going to have to go through this quicker, and you can learn a lot more about this if you go and take the assessment. They'll give you more information. But the one thing about them is they will not buy unless you give them a deal. Everybody else you don't have to give a deal to, but this personality just won't. And so you always go in with a higher price so that you can give them a deal that they think they got just for them. But when you give them a deal, it's got to be today only, and they've got to sign right now or give you the check right now, because if they agree to the deal and you walk away tomorrow, when you come back to get that paper signed, they're going to want a better deal. Okay, next slide. The regulator is almost exactly the opposite. Think of your family doctor. Comes in, they're methodical about doing the evaluation. They don't get emotionally upset, very even-keeled, very rational about what they do. They do everything perfectly as it should be. If you looked at their LinkedIn profile, you'll see steady job experience. Their LinkedIn profile will be done completely and done well. And they are great to deal with because you can be very even-toned and rational with them. You do not want to be emotionally, if you're a very emotional, upbeat person, you want to tone it down when you talk to the regulator. And they are very interested in best practices. And what's best practices? How is that done? What are other people doing? Case studies work well as long as you can defend that from the standpoint of the best practice. All right, next one, the artist. So the artist, you know, because they just beat to a different drummer. If they show a picture on their LinkedIn profile with blue or pink hair, almost like for sure an artist. Dressed in all black, almost sure an artist. They are great if you're a startup. Artists will buy from startups. Many of the other ones, particularly Double Checker and to some extent the politicians, will not. Doesn't matter. They're not taking the career risk. But an artist will. In fact, an artist by definition doesn't want to do what everybody else has done. Don't really care as much about your case studies. They want to know how new and innovative this is. They want you to get them to think with them about doing things outside the box. Okay, next one. The socializer, many of you are, if you're in sales, are socializers. This is the upbeat personality type. You could take rejection again and again and again and snap back from it. You're very verbal. You can be incredibly successful as long as you figure out what you can and can't do and don't try to be something you're not. If you're a socializer, master communication. It's your strength. Become good at understanding tonality, influence, study those things, and you'll be great. Now, if you're trying to identify a socializer in LinkedIn, oftentimes they move laterally, take the same position, move a sales position from one company to another. You'll see them majoring in communications or communications related subjects in college. And there may even be some mistakes on their LinkedIn profile because, you know, this detail is not their thing and they don't really care about it as much. Okay, the politician. If you're going to look for somebody to be a strong internal advocate for you, you want the politician, particularly if you're a company that's been around for a while. These people take charge. They like to make decisions. They want you to be short and to the point with what they do. But unlike the go-getters that are the beginning, which are equally dominant, and you can sometimes mix them up, the politician will show on their resume that they've been promoted within companies. Most people won't do that. They just show their current position. These people will show that they've, in company ABC, they started out as a manager and got promoted at ABC to vice president and all the way up. They'll actually show that kind of stuff. But, okay, next one, the engineer. Sorry for rushing through this, but we're gonna run out of time. In fact, you know what? You can write to me actually and get the rest of these. Looking at time, I think that probably what we should do is ask for questions on this. What do you think, Jason? And then they can get the rest of the information. And while we're doing that, if you could put the thing up about where they can go and take the assessment.
Yeah, I mean, do you want to just briefly at least go over the headline for each of these and then?
Sure. Okay, that's fine. So the engineer is the most detail-oriented person, probably not a great internal advocate for you because they just have to be too detailed and process-oriented. Easy to see because they write a lot on their LinkedIn long sentences. Go ahead to the next one. And the double checkers, These people are totally risk averse. If you're the company that's been around and what you do is help people avoid risk, you want to find a double checker in the organization, because they will drive your program to success. They'll make sure everybody buys it, because they are the most risk averse people there. So back to what Jason started about here. When you look at an org chart, you should look at it from the perspective of, how do I message, and this is particularly marketing, each of these people? But then strategically, who do I want to recruit as my internal advocate? So in this case, for a company that's been around for a while, they want Kate. She's a high-level position. She's a politician personality type. She's going to drive things. If we can convince Kate, she's going to convince others. Whereas Jared, wrong person for us. We don't want Jared. We'll let Kate influence Jared and let marketing influence Jared. Who we want to call on and get on our side first is Kate. And so this is what Jason was talking about. You've got to have this intelligence for everybody. The day of just calling on one person in a company is, you just can't afford it to do it. Let's go to the next one. So there you go. So there's the assessment. And I've covered a lot of ground. I can cover more, but I want to see and stop here and see if there are any questions about this so far.
Yep. All right. So we have the Q&A, or sorry, the chat side panel here in Zoom. Pop in any questions you guys have. We'll spend a few minutes on Q&A here. While we wait for some questions, Bruce, I think it'd be great to talk through briefly kind of how do you, so you've identified who these different personalities are. You've identified the ones that you want to target. But what are some brief tips or tricks on how to target, how should you tailor your content or your messaging around those?
So once you know the personality, the next thing you need to know is really make a map of your unique value propositions. And then what you want to do is map your unique value propositions to each of the personalities. So your company that's been around, the thing that's your strongest unique value proposition is you're the largest in the industry. You may not have the newest, latest technology, but you're the largest in the industry. Who are you going to target? You're going to target double checkers. And you're going to target double checkers with messages about how long you've been around, how many people have used you, how safe it is, and oh, by the way, how risky it is to not use you, because these people respond to risk messages. On the other hand, with the artist, the same thing. You do your unique value propositions. You have a new product. You have a new technology. That's what they're going to want to know about, how to creatively use that new technology to solve problems. You'd like to meet with them to show them how to talk through how they can use your technology to solve problems in a creative way. The politician, if you've got something that really, it just very clearly saves money, has a really super ROI, go right to ROI. Look, this is our guarantee. We can save you this amount of money. We can improve this performance metric by this amount. Go there. Don't spend a lot of time on details marketing about how. Go right for the ROI. And interestingly enough, now if you got a Gogetter, they don't really care what happens to the company. They care some. They care about how they look doing it. Do they look great to senior management, particularly actually senior management of other companies? The politician wants to look great to senior management too, but they want to look great to senior management above them internally. So you'll talk about that and how this being a good decision maker helps them and helps their company. Hint, everybody notices. But when we talk to the Gogetter, it's all about how we can help them. And how, by the way, we'll probably do a webinar or blog article or something about how you use this technology, because who do they want to look great to? People externally to the company that will recruit them for the next highest job. And the engineer, if you're recruiting them, they don't care about looking great to somebody. They care about completing inspired projects. This will help you on your project. And with the engineer, know that it's going to take a lot of time to make that sale, which is actually a good thing, because all your competitive salespeople will give up because it takes so long for an engineer to make up their mind. But once they do, they don't change it. They drive that process through, and they have all the ammunition to do it. So those are a few hints to doing that. I can send anybody that is interested more details on doing that and more information on how to find personality. And then if you'd like, the latest methodology is actually to pull people into personality-based funnels that show them the right content in the way they need to see it and are actually intelligent with that, and would use what Jason provides to actually influence them over and nurture them over a longer period of time.
Great. We got a question from the audience asking, how does the size of a company influence the number of decision makers that are involved in a deal? It's interesting to get your take on that. My experience has been, the larger the organization, typically the more decision makers you're going to have at the table. That's not always 100%, because you can. At bigger organizations, it can start getting siloed between departments and stuff like that, and those individual departments can oftentimes have their own decision-making authority. So it's not a hard rule, but typically the larger the organization, the more that you're going to have at the table, has been my experience. What about you, Bruce?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right about the division of labor there, and there's another factor that causes, and that is internal politics. The larger the organization, the more internal politics will really determine the decision. And so in large organizations, you always want to try to find yourself a socializer who will talk to you, because a socializer is going to talk enough to tell you what's going on internally. So you understand the internal politics. If you don't understand the internal politics, you're just going to get killed before you ever know it.
Yeah, that speaks to a great strategy that I try and have my sell team employ is, you spoke to the socializer oftentimes being a salesperson, and salespeople tend to be a great way to get your foot in the door and find an advocate or a cheerleader, even though they're rarely the ones that have the budget or can sign off on it. More often than not, they're going to be the ones that know the internal power structure. They're going to be the ones that are friendly with all of the decision makers. And if you can sell them on the value, then they're oftentimes going to be your biggest proponent. I know oftentimes, as head of marketing or head of growth, I get pitched all day long, and it's 99% of the time it's going to fall on deaf ears. But if you successfully pitch one of my salespeople and they come to me after having vetted it, then that's how you'll get me to actually pay attention.
Yep. It's an interesting thing that you just said, though, and it's true across the board. 99% of the people that you talk to, it falls on deaf ears because they're ineffective at communicating value. Stunning. I mean, the cost of sales, the cost of a BDR organization is now really unsustainable because the quality is just not there. The conversion rates are not there. And it tells out in that statistic, which is true across the board. Most of the time, executives dread cold calls, yet they have their salespeople do cold calling. Yeah, so it's almost the opposite of the golden rule. I don't know. Anyway, which by the way, I believe in calling. I just believe in being very warm beforehand and warming people up before you make that call, so the chance of that call succeeding are much, much higher.
Yeah, and it speaks to a trend that we didn't touch on in the deck. So we have dual trends kind of driving a lot of this. One is increases in number of decision makers that are involved in buying decisions and buying process. The other piece is, around sales and marketing, which is, for the last 10 years, we've seen, proliferation and kind of democratization of a lot of, what used to be enterprise tools, in particular marketing automation and sales acceleration or enablement platforms. And what happened with all of that is it became really, really easy to email and call at scale. And so whenever that happened, everybody took the attitude, let's open this up. Let's just pour as many people in the top as possible. And then whatever gets churned out the other end of the machine is what we have to work off of. But we all sort of shot ourselves in the foot with that strategy, because now all our channels have become so busy and so crowded, and it's so difficult to break through the noise and actually get conversations going, that it's sort of back to sales and marketing 101. You've really got to know your audience. You really got to tailor your content. You've really got to know who you're pitching to and how to do it.
Yeah, you're right. Quality now and effectiveness is the only way forward, because we've destroyed all the channels by being with this move to just numbers. How many activities can you get sales rep to do? And people have put up now very effective defenses so you can't get through. I challenge any executive on this call to actually track down the cost of their business development, the total cost, the cost of the people, the cost of the managers, the cost of housing, how much it costs you in sales development effort to generate a sale. You do it, you'll be stunned there. So there you have it. Okay, well, yeah, that's great. Any other questions?
Cool. I know we're about 8 minutes over, but real quick, if anybody else has anything else to add in here. Otherwise, like I said, we will send out an email with a link to the recording of the deck. You can reply directly to that email, as well as mine and Bruce's email addresses are here on the last slide of the deck that you'll have access to whenever we share that with you. But doesn't look like we have any other questions right now, Bruce.
All right.
But
one last thing I'd throw in there then, just if you look at my email there, the joyai.com, if you just go to joyai.org, you, your team, anybody you want can take the personality assessment. It'll give you the whole report. As soon as you're done, it's fascinating.
Great, great. All right, thanks everybody for joining us today. Bruce, thanks so much for being on with us, and excellent content and discussion here.
Yeah, it was a joy to be with you, Jason. Thanks for inviting me.
All right, thanks everybody.